With the cockpit completed, the base finished, and the colors on, there's only one thing left to do. Ooh, eat some cookies. Hey, I'm John. Thanks for joining me for this video today. Now, those were no YouTube video prop cookies. Those were real homemade sugar cookies that my wife made for me, and they were so good. But anyway, it's time to get on with the weathering for this A-Wing fighter. Now, when it comes to weathering Star Wars ships, especially the Alliance fighters, you basically have to come down to one of three decisions in how you're going to do it. There's variations on all of these, of course, but it's basically one of these three methods. One, you can choose not to weather it and just leave it looking clean, which is perfectly fine because, I mean, they look cool anyway. So that's one option. I'm not going to be choosing that option. Another option is to weather it as they were weathered on screen, meaning to try and replicate the way that the movie props looked. And that generally meant that the areas like on this particular fighter, on the A-Wing fighter, the red areas and maybe some of the gray areas would be chipped, but the white areas would not. And these would be chipped to the white color. And then there would be lots of streaks and soot and stains and just various stains all over it that would make it look dirty. I'm assuming, based on some reading I've done, not particular direct statements, but it seemed to allude to that type of weathering was just mainly to convey that it was kind of beat up and dirty for the half second that it was going to be on screen. Like this one. This one wasn't really on screen that very long in Return of the Jedi. It kind of flew towards a Star Destroyer's bridge and then crashed into it. So that's all we saw of it. If you'd like to see a video that covers canon weathering, then check this link up in this corner here, if I remember to stick it there, after this video, of course. But if you're wanting to do something other than canon weathering, then it's kind of however you want to do it. And that's the plan that I have for weathering this model in this video. Now, the first thing I want to do is a little bit of a dot filter effect. My purpose for doing that is I want to provide some sense of motion. I want vectored streaking going back. And I'm only going to use a couple of colors for that. And I'm just going to run those colors along the bottom of the screen in the same order I have them on my palette. And for the palette check, rice-a-roni Spanish rice. Always a good choice for your palette. So I'm going to start with, on the white, I'm going to use the light gray color. I'm just going to plop in a dot, a little bit of a streak. And I'm using Wilder oils from Adam Wilder. He's a fabulous armor modeler if you've never seen his work. And he's got a KV-1 series, a Russian tank, on YouTube that is, I think in terms of weathering, it is the gold standard for documenting videos on weathering. But I'm going to put these on here just like that. And then I'm going to get a flat brush and I'm going to damp it in odorless thinner, and then I'm going to tap most of it off on to a paper towel. I'm just going to streak these back like this. And you see that I'm not stabbing at it, I'm not making fast work of it. I'm allowing the oils to be pulled back. And it's removing a great deal of it. Wilder oils are very wet, very slick. I kind of like that. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the red areas. I'm just going to put this in there like that. And you can use more colors than this. I chose to just use a couple, but you could certainly use more. Now, if this were in a diorama or if you wanted to convey the notion that it's sitting still, like if you built it with the landing gear down. I don't know that I would do the vectored streaking, but rather if you wanted to have the tonal variation that you can have with the oils, I would use more of a stippling method to blend the oils in, and that would help sell the notion that it's sitting still. So what I'm going to do this time is I'm going to grab a separate brush because I don't want the colors mixing. They're different enough that I don't want to get the gray on the red and the red on the gray. So I'll just do that same method and streak it back. And you can streak it forward too. I mean, the point is to have the vectors. Using Vallejo Cold White, I'm going to start the chipping on the red parts with the sponge. And I'm going to go in very lightly at first to establish just some very fine chipping along the leading edge and a few of the other panels. After I've done the sponge chipping, I'm going to go in with this small brush and just begin doing some brush chipping. Now for this process, I've thinned the paint down almost to the point that it could be used for airbrushing. And I'm just going to kind of let the tip dance along and essentially stipple in some chips. And these are going to be more focused along panel lines. And also, this is where I'll add, if I want to have any streaks like that, I'll add those in, and any larger chips. I'll just use a series of stippling motions in one area to kind of build up a large chip. Now for the white areas, I'm going to do some neutral gray chipping with a sponge. Now this is where I'm departing from the studio prop look. They generally didn't put chipping on the white areas, but rather reserved it for the colored areas. The reason I chose neutral gray rather than a darker gray is I want there to be less contrast between the colors so that I can get away with a little more chipping and not have it look too out of place. See, that kind of gives it, there's a lot of chips there, but they don't really stand out too much because of the low contrast of the colors. Now, as I did with the white, I'm going to do some brush chipping here on the underside. Well, I'm going to do it all over, but right now I'm demonstrating on the underside, obviously. But I'm going to do some brush chipping to develop some larger chips. Now, what I'm imagining here is that this is either a primer color or the actual material, the surface material underneath, whether it's some kind of Star Wars steel or composite, doesn't really matter at this point. It's just the most base layer of the ship itself. So that's what I'm imagining this to be. Now what that means is that in addition to doing some brush chipping here on the white areas, I'm going to go into the areas that I had previously chipped, and I'm going to add a second layer of chip there to show that they go all the way down to the base primer or material. With the chipping completed, I want to add some stains, some streaks, things to represent fluid stains, maybe some scorch marks. Just start really dirtying it up a bit. For this, I'm going to use some Starship Filth, the Ammo MIG oil brusher. I like this because it's kind of a browny, dirty look. It's a little lighter than the Abteilung 502 Starship Filth color. So I prefer the Ammo MIG color. Now there's going to be several ways that I'm going to put this on here. On a few of these areas, I'm going to basically paint it in aft of, say, a panel like this. I'm just going to put in some like that. On raised details like this, I'm going to put in just a little dot like that. Put some more here. Any of these raised details, maybe put a little on the top to make it look like it's coming out of that, whatever that dimple is. I have no idea what it's supposed to represent, but we're going to pretend that it leaks fluid. Now, there's also going to be some areas that I'm just going to want some general streaking to come from. Like, I'm going to make a command decision that there's going to be some streaking that comes from this panel. And so just after that panel line, I'm going to put in some paint like this. And I'm going to put in a little here. In some areas, I just want to add a general streak. So I'm going to start one right here, and I'm going to put in some color to pull it back. Now, when you're doing a streak like this, make sure you streak it in the direction of the airflow, not necessarily in the direction of the panel line, because they may be two different things. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a second brush that doesn't have any paint on it, and I'm going to dip it in some odorless thinner and work off most of it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to come in here like at the streak, and I'm going to start pulling back before I get to the paint, and then just slowly work my way into the paint like that, and begin pulling it back, and then coming back out, letting it spread out and blend a little bit. And I'll even turn it around so that I can do the same thing from this side. And I just start outside of it and work my way into it, and just continue to pull that back like that. Now here, I want this one much more blended, so I'm going to start pulling this back like this. And I'm going to keep blending this back, pulling the color back, because I don't want the edge to be quite as dark as this one. So I'm going to just keep pulling it back like this. Right now you're probably looking at it going, yeah, you've ruined that. No, just watch. This is the beauty of oils. This is the beauty of the flexibility of oils. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pick up some of that paint, push it back like that, and I just keep working back and forth like this to get the streak dialed in like I want. And then when I get it about to the point I want, I just pull it all the way back like that. So I've essentially left a little bit here and then just tinted that, but it just hints that something has gone on there. Now for this one, I want it to be much more stark. So I'm just going to pull it back just a little bit like that, and then push it back into the line and leave a little more of the grime there with that. I'm not going to remove as much. And then for these, I'm just going to streak them back. But you see how I'm just cleaning that up. I'm occasionally wiping off the brush, dipping it in thinner again, just manipulating things to look like I want. I want to add in some staining that represents just surface staining, not fluid leaks, not chipping, but just the kind of grime and stain that's going to end up on any vehicle painted white. If you've ever had a white car, you know how it gets stains on there. Now at the same time, I have to recognize that while this thing flies in the atmosphere, it spends a lot of time in space too, so I don't want to overdo it. What I'm going to use for this is this Vallejo Model Wash gray color. This goes on a lot darker than it dries, and you have to stir it a lot in your palette because the pigment settles down. But what I do is I get some on my brush and I work most of it off, and then I just start stippling on some stains like this. And when I get a few dots of it on there, I begin unloading the brush and spreading this around more. Now what's happening is it's spreading it out a bit, but it's also pulling some of it up off of the surface. And I just keep working this like that to just introduce some discoloration in certain areas. Just add in some discoloration here and there. Doesn't have to be in a lot of places, just enough to sell to the eye that this is a used military vehicle. The reason I like using this acrylic product is it actually leaves tide marks. A lot of times we don't want tide marks on our models, but in this case I think it sells the notion of just kind of grime and dirt and things like that. Another thing I want to simulate is some fuel stains. I'm going to use this Vallejo fuel stains product. It's basically just a thin reddish brown color that dries fairly quickly. Now I don't know which one of these is the gas cap, but I'm just going to imagine that some of these places may have some kind of fluid that is put into them, and occasionally that may spill out. Now the application is much like I did with the wash, that I put a little down and then I begin to pull it back just a little bit with the brush, wiping it off like that. Now you can make it as intense as you want. You don't have to wipe it off like I'm doing. You could just leave it on. In fact, I'll do that. I'll just put one right there and leave it. Well, there's not that much. Maybe I out-subtled myself, but I'll just put that on there, and it just represents some fluid staining that, like I said, you fill up if you've ever filled up a lawnmower engine, those little push mowers, sometimes you can accidentally put too much gas in it and it spills out. So I don't know what kind of space fuel an A-wing fighter uses, but I'm imagining it's this color. Even thinned paint will do here. I've even tested the theory, and it does work, that you can use coffee. When you accidentally dip your brush in your coffee in the morning when you're doing staining, I found out you can use coffee. Now I want to do some soot effects here in the engine exhaust areas, both these side engines and these smaller nozzles that are in here. And for here, I want to just do some general staining, which I've already started the process, but I want to do some general staining around the inside of these rings here. And then I just want to do kind of a streak here, and then one on the underside also. And for this, I'm going to use these Tamiya weathering powders. This is the color I'm going to be using is Soot. Now, you'll notice that I've covered my workspace in some paper towel, which I recommend doing because this stuff will go everywhere. But I'm just going to take it and just kind of streak it back like that. I don't want necessarily a lot of staining, just enough to suggest that there's some kind of exhaust thing going on there. Now, I could use oil paints here. Oil paints will certainly be more permanent. This could potentially wipe off, though I'm counting on the fact that I doubt anybody's going to be sticking their fingers in there, that it'll survive. Well, I think I'm going to call this model done. I'm pretty happy with how it turned out. You'll note that I've got the canopy on now. I just used the canopy. There's two canopies that come with the kit. One with framework that you can paint, and the other one with recess on it, and you put this plastic part over it. I chose to use that. I may go back and use the painted one because I realized that when I cut the canopy from the sprue, it leaves kind of a mark there, and so I may go back and use the painted one, but either one works. But I'm really happy with how this turned out. This is my second build of this kit, and it has only further cemented my belief that of all the wonderful Bandai alphabet soup fighters you can build, the A-wing, the B-wing, the X-wing, the Y-wing, and of course the U-wing, and to an extent even the TIE fighters, even though they're the other guys, of all the fighters that Bandai puts out, I think this is the best kit. They're all fun to build. I've built all of them. I like all of them. Enjoyed every one of them and would build them all again. But this is one that if I had to say, okay, build one Starfighter, this is the one. The X-Wing is more iconic. The Y-Wing has got a cool factor, so does the B-Wing. But this one, just for the total experience, I think this is the kit. So if you've been on the fence about getting it, trust me, get it, build it. You'll enjoy it. It's a great kit. Well, thank you so much for joining me for this video, and especially if you're still watching here at the end. I hope this video, and I hope this series of videos on building the A-Wing fighter has been helpful to you. Perhaps it's given you some ideas for your own build. Maybe it's shown you some things you don't want to do. At the very least, maybe it's helped you drift off to sleep as you watch YouTube in the evenings as I do. Whatever the case, thank you for watching. There is, of course, the link down somewhere over here to subscribe, and there's a little bell icon. So if you've not already subscribed to the channel and hit that icon, I would be most grateful if you would do that. It just helps me grow the channel and helps you know when I have new videos out. So I would appreciate that a lot. There's also links down below to the social media platforms that I'm on. And if you're on one of those, I would love for you to connect with me there. I'd love to hear from you. I always like hearing from the folks who watch my videos. I appreciate it very much. There's also a link to Patreon. So if you would like to support the work that I do through Patreon, please click on that link and take a look at what is available there. And of course, if you are already a Patreon supporter, thank you so much for the support you give to me in this hobby, because it's not only a blessing to me, it is a blessing to my family, because this is, I'm not a full-time YouTuber. I have a full-time day job as a web developer. So this is supplemental income, but it's income that helps me do the work that I do. It also, on occasion, puts tires on the car and fixes radiator hoses. So we are grateful for the support you give us in this, and I just want you to know how much I appreciate it. And finally, as I always like to do, I'll leave you with one closing thought. In this hobby, if you're not having fun, you're doing it wrong. Happy day to you, friends. Bye-bye.